In January 1842, Emerson delivered a lecture called The Transcendentalist at the Masonic Temple in Boston. It was later printed in the Dial magazine dedicated to the Transcendentalist movement and then included in his 1849 collection Nature. In this essay, Emerson explains what it means to be a Transcendentalist and describes the followers of this optimistic philosophy as often feeling misunderstood and isolated. He hints that he may be referring to specific people who fits this description. Though he doesn't name anyone directly, it seems that Emerson hoped this essay would encourage Transcendentalists to live up to their lofty ideals and take action based on their beliefs. The essay is key to understanding how Emerson's thoughts on Transcendentalism evolved, especially as he grappled with some of its contradictions and weaknesses. Though the essay doesn't have clear divisions, it can be split into three main parts. First, Emerson explains Transcendentalism as a type of idealism in contrast to materialism, which focuses on physical possessions and the material world. In the second part, he addresses the criticisms and shortcomings often associated with Transcendentalism and reflects on its history. In the final section, Emerson describes the people who follow this philosophy and discusses the misunderstandings that arise between them and the general public. What people call Transcendentalism is actually the old philosophy of idealism. Throughout history, people have been divided into two main groups, materialists and idealists. Emerson explains this by listing the differences between these ways of thinking. Materialists focus on facts and evidence, while idealists live more spiritually, relying on imagination and intuition. Materialists care about basic human needs, whereas idealists focus on personal growth. Once someone becomes as, they can't go back to being a materialist because they are always seeking something beyond the physical world. Idealists see the physical world as less important than how the mind understands it. Since everyone sees the world in their own way, there is no single true view of reality. Idealists believe that life is personal and subjective, and people are always striving to recognize the ideal. On the other hand, materialists represented by figures like bankers, stockbrokers, rely on facts like numbers and see the imagination as unreliable. Materialist main shortcoming is that they don't consider faith, which cannot be measured or fully understood. Materialists and idealists also relate to people and objects differently. Materialists judge things based on size, appearance, or quantity. More is better for them. Idealists, however, value things based on personal or inner worth, which Emerson calls rank. They measure everything, including people, by their own personal standards, not by what society thinks is important. Instead of trying to fix problems in the outside world, idealists believe we should work on improving our character. Emerson, like idealists, believes that a person's morals naturally come from within. His list of ethical traits is similar to the ideas he talks about in Self-Reliance. He values self-dependence and thinks the best way to live is to be self-sustained, needing nothing from outside forces. For Emerson, society is good when it doesn't interfere with individuality, but it isn't best when it allows for solitude. Each person is the center of their own world, shaping how they see reality, an idea that comes up often in his essays. Emerson idealism to Transcendentalism, he explains that the Transcendentalist is someone who is deeply focused on themselves and gains a mystical understanding of the universe, free from rules or religious doctrines. He refers to a scene from Shakespeare's Othello, where Desdemona, even though she is dying, lies to protect Othello. Emilia, Desdemona's servant, says that this lie makes Desdemona more virtuous. Emerson then quotes philosopher Friedrich Jacobi, who says that even though lying is seen as morally wrong, Desdemona's lie brings her closer to a deeper truth. This idea of these moral rules to reach a higher understanding is similar to the principles of Transcendentalism. Emerson also compares this to philosophies like Buddhism, where good deeds are believed to be rewarded. Emerson might have brought up Jacobi and other cultural philosophies to defend Transcendentalism from criticism. He admits that no one can live a completely spiritual life, but he believes that Transcendentalists come closest to achieving this ideal. While history doesn't show a perfect example of a purely spiritual life, Transcendentalists aim for this goal. Throughout history, people with similar ideals have been called Stoics, Protestants, ascetics, Puritans, and Quakers, and in Emerson's time they are known as idealists. Emerson reminds us that the term Transcendentalism was first used by the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. Kant argued that the mind has its own ways of understanding the world, which he called transcendental, opposing to John Locke's belief that all knowledge comes from what we experience through our senses. Emerson then turns his attention to the transcendentalists of his time. He points out that there are many intelligent and idealistic people who have withdrawn from society to live isolated and unproductive lives. Though they are capable of creating great art, they seem to have a strange kind of laziness, holding back from using their talents in a way that benefits the public. Emerson wonders why these people live this way. He thinks that transcendentalists find difficult to connect with society because they are so focused on their spiritual lives. Everyday life does not satisfy them. They may even feel lonely, but they prefer being alone because they believe that normal human interactions have little to offer them. They seek deep, meaningful connections or none at all. Since they strive for perfection and see human life as flawed, these idealists would rather spend time with nature or a book than engage with what they see as the shallow conversations and concerns of ordinary people. In the final part of his essay, Emerson speaks directly to the idealists. Though the world may not understand their distance from society, he challenges them to use their special understanding to help others. If they don't take action, their gifts will be wasted. He believes that good people, idealists, need to show and act their wisdom through noble deeds so society can learn from them. Emerson acknowledges that it is not entirely the idealist's fault for staying distant. Social causes like ending slavery or promoting temperance lose their high moral value when they are commercialized or overly promoted. This cheapening of great causes makes idealists reluctant to join even the movements they care about. Emerson tries to understand the idealists by putting himself in the shoes using I to express their thoughts. He explains that they refuse to follow routines and believe that it is the quality of a moment that matters, not the number of events or people involved. When society asks idealists to offer a better model for how things should be, they often cannot, because if something is not perfect, they prefer to do nothing at all. He then offers a more view of idealists. While they seem detached or inactive, they are deeply troubled by society's problems and also by their own moral failings. Their heightened awareness of right and wrong can lead to depression, making them wish for an escape from the burden of their high standards. They don't take on tasks they can do perfectly, while results in their passivity and indecisiveness, characters that bother them and society. Another issue for idealists is their deep love for beauty. In American society, beauty is often seen as less important than goodness and truth. This attitude makes it difficult for idealists to express their ideas through action, as they are mocked for valuing beauty so much. Society finds it offensive. The idealists demand perfection before they act to improve things, while idealists feel society needs to change first. Emerson explains that these transcendentalists are not experienced philosophers, but thinkers trying to find their own way. They don't have detailed plans for society's improvement, but may offer new ways of thinking. In final paragraphs, Emerson says that idealists are just as important to society as workers, farmers, and craftsmen. These intellectuals help make new discoveries and provide moral guidance. Even though society is mostly focused on material progress like technology and comfort, he calls for voices that speak to the spirit and guide society in the right direction. Emerson believes that these few hermits will be remembered and admired not just for what they do, but for what they choose not to do. Their quietness and restraint will ultimately benefit society and serve as